Daniel Carter, a millionaire, becomes captivated by the new barista, Olivia Stone. An unexpected love? What would happen if fate crossed the paths of two people broken by the past but seeking a new chance? Before we continue, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching the video from. And don't forget to subscribe. The morning sun filtered through the large glass windows of the Daily Grind, casting a warm glow across the cozy cafe. The rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee enveloped the space, mingling with the sweet scent of pastries that lined the display counter. Daniel Carter, a successful entrepreneur known for his sharp suits and even sharper business acumen, ambled through the door as he did every morning, ready to start his day with a cup of his favorite dark roast. As he approached the counter, he noticed a new barista. She was slightly shorter than him, with chestnut hair pulled back into a practical ponytail, and her hazel eyes held a certain depth that intrigued him. She spoke to the customer in front of him with a warm smile, but there was a hint of sadness that flickered across her face, a fleeting shadow that suggested she was carrying some unspoken burdens. "Good morning. What can I get started for you today?" she asked, her voice soft yet inviting. "Just a dark roast, please," Daniel replied, his gaze lingering on her. "And what's your name?" "Olivia," she said, her smile widening, though her eyes still seemed a little distant. "I just started here last week. Nice to meet you, Olivia." "I'm Daniel," he said, extending his hand. She hesitated for a moment before shaking it, her grip firm but her demeanor reserved. As he waited for his coffee, Daniel observed her interactions with the other customers. Olivia was efficient and friendly, but there was an air of caution about her, as if she was carefully measuring her words and actions. He was captivated, not just by her beauty, which was undeniable, but by the layers he sensed beneath her surface. There was something in her eyes that spoke of stories untold, and Daniel found himself wanting to know more. "Here's your coffee," Olivia said, handing over the steaming cup with a practiced smile. "I hope you enjoy it." "I always do," he replied, flashing her a genuine smile that made her cheeks flush slightly. "I'll be back tomorrow." As he turned to leave, he caught a glimpse of her watching him, her expression contemplative. Daniel felt a strange pull toward her, an instinctive desire to know the woman behind the barista's apron. He stepped out into the bustling street, the cool air awakening him fully, but his thoughts lingered on Olivia. Later that day, Olivia Stone stood behind the counter of the Daily Grind, her hands busy with the familiar motions of brewing coffee and preparing pastries. Despite the cheerful chatter of the cafe and the comforting hum of machines, her mind was elsewhere, lost in the whirlwind of her own thoughts. Being a single mother was a constant balancing act, and today was no exception. Sophie, her 5-year-old daughter, was at home with a babysitter, and Olivia felt a pang of guilt for not being there with her. Her mind wandered back to the memories of her ex-husband, a man who once promised her the world but had shattered that promise when he walked away, leaving her to pick up the pieces. She recalled the late nights spent crying into her pillow, the feeling of betrayal that wrapped around her like a heavy cloak. She had trusted him completely, and when he left, it felt as if the foundation of her life had crumbled. "You okay, Liv?" Mia, her best friend, asked from a nearby table, concern etched across her features. Mia had been her rock through the darkest times and was always attuned to Olivia's moods. "Yeah, just thinking," Olivia replied, forcing a smile. "I have a lot on my plate." "Like what?" Mia pressed, leaning forward, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "You can't keep all your secrets from me." Sighing, Olivia wiped her hands on her apron, glancing around to ensure no customers were within earshot. "It's just, being a mom is hard, and sometimes I feel like I'm drowning. I wish I had someone to share it with, but I'm not sure I can ever trust anyone again." Mia reached across the table, placing her hand on Olivia's arm. "You deserve happiness, Liv. Just because your ex was a jerk doesn't mean all men are. You need to let someone in, even just a little." "I don't know," Olivia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's scary. What if I get hurt again? What if Sophie gets hurt?" "Love is risky, but it can also be incredibly rewarding," Mia replied, her tone encouraging. "Just keep your heart open. You might be surprised by what you find." As the afternoon wore on, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled in her stomach. She loved being a mother to Sophie, but the weight of her past hung over her like a dark cloud. She had to focus on her daughter's well-being before even considering the idea of romance or opening herself up to someone new. The next morning arrived, and Daniel found himself back at the daily grind, the allure of Olivia drawing him in like a moth to a flame. As he entered, he noticed her serving customers with the same warmth as before, though today, there was a flicker of something different in her demeanor, perhaps a hint of vulnerability that tugged at his heart. "Good morning, Daniel." Olivia greeted him, her smile brightening the room. "Back for your daily fix?" "Absolutely," he replied, stepping closer to the counter. "You know, I was thinking, you have a way of making people feel welcome here." "Thanks," she said, slightly taken aback by the compliment. "I just try to do my best." Daniel leaned against the counter, feeling a boldness surge within him. "Can I ask you something personal?" Olivia raised an eyebrow, curiosity piqued. "Sure, but I might not have all the answers. What do you like to do when you're not serving coffee?" he inquired, genuinely interested. She hesitated, her expression shifting as if she were weighing her words carefully. "Honestly, I spend most of my time with my daughter. She keeps me pretty busy." "Must be rewarding," he said, his tone softening. "What's her name?" "Sophie," Olivia replied, her eyes lighting up at the mention of her daughter. "She's my whole world." "I'd love to hear more about her sometime," Daniel suggested, his heart racing as he felt a connection blossom between them. "And you too. I'm curious about you, Olivia." Her gaze faltered, and for a brief moment, Daniel caught a glimpse of the walls she had built around herself. "I'm just an ordinary woman trying to get by," she said, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her voice. "Ordinary? I don't think so," Daniel countered, his resolve strengthening. "You're extraordinary for all that you've overcome." For a moment, they stood there, the world around them fading into the background. Olivia's heart raced as she felt a flicker of hope igniting within her. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for something more. But as quickly as the thought arose, her fears flooded back in, reminding her of the pain of trusting too easily. "Thanks, Daniel," she said, breaking the spell. "I really appreciate your kindness, but I should get back to work." "Of course," he replied, sensing her retreat. "I'll be around." "I'm looking forward to hearing more about Sophie." As he left the cafe, Daniel felt a mix of determination and uncertainty swirl within him. He was drawn to Olivia in ways he hadn't expected, and he couldn't shake the feeling that she was worth the effort. But he also sensed the wall she had built, and he knew it would take time to break through. Olivia watched him go, her heart pounding. There was something about Daniel that made her feel seen, something that stirred a longing in her chest. But as she turned back to her work, the reality of her situation settled heavily on her shoulders. Opening her heart again felt like a risk she wasn't sure she could take. Yet the thought of what could be lingered tantalizingly at the edges of her mind, refusing to let go. Daniel Carter found himself returning to the cafe more frequently than he had ever intended. Each morning, the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the sound of clinking cups had become a comforting ritual. But it was not just the ambience that drew him in. It was Olivia Stone, the barista whose warm smile and gentle demeanor had captivated him from the moment he had first seen her. There was something about her. Perhaps it was the subtle sadness that lingered in her eyes, or the way she poured her heart into her work that made him want to know her better. On this particular morning, Daniel approached the counter, catching Olivia's gaze as she wiped down the espresso machine. She looked up, and for a fleeting moment, her expression softened. "Good morning, Daniel," she greeted, her voice a melodious blend of warmth and caution. "Good morning, Olivia," he replied, leaning slightly on the counter, his heart racing. "How's your day so far?" "It's been busy," she responded, glancing over her shoulder to see if the line was growing. "But I like it that way. It keeps my mind off things." Daniel noticed the slight tremor in her voice, a reminder of the walls she had built around her heart. He wanted to break through those barriers, but he was acutely aware of her guarded nature. "Would you like to take a break later?" "I'd love to chat more," he suggested, hoping to offer her an escape, even if just for a short while. Olivia hesitated, biting her lower lip. "I don't know if I can," she said, her eyes darting to the clock on the wall. "It's really busy today." "Just 10 minutes?" Daniel pressed, his eyes locking onto hers in an earnest plea. "I promise I won't take up too much of your time." Finally, a small smile broke through her uncertainty. "Okay, 10 minutes," she relented, and Daniel felt a surge of triumph. As the minutes ticked by, Daniel found himself lost in thought, wondering how to reach the woman who stood before him. He was determined to peel back the layers, to understand the woman behind the sadness. When Olivia finally took her break, they found a secluded corner of the cafe, away from the hustle and bustle. "Thank you for this," she said, her voice tinged with a mix of gratitude and apprehension. "I really needed a moment away." Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying her face. "You're welcome. I've noticed you seem, well, a bit overwhelmed sometimes," he said gently. "Is everything all right?" Olivia sighed, running a hand through her hair. It's complicated," she replied, her eyes momentarily clouding over. "I have a lot on my plate, and sometimes it feels like I'm just trying to keep my head above water." "What's complicated?" Daniel probed, his voice softening. "You can talk to me if you want." She hesitated, her defenses rising momentarily. "I don't want to burden you with my problems," she said, her tone cautious. Daniel shook his head, undeterred. "You're not a burden, Olivia. I genuinely care. I want to know you." With a deep breath, Olivia finally opened up. "I'm a single mother. My ex-husband, he left when I needed him the most. It's been hard raising Sophie alone, and I'm just scared of getting hurt again." Daniel's heart ached for her. "I can't imagine how difficult that must be," he said, his voice steady. "But you're doing an incredible job. I see how hard you work, and it's admirable." "Thank you," she murmured, her eyes softening. "But sometimes I feel like I'm not enough for her." "You are more than enough," he reassured her. "And it takes a lot of strength to be a single parent. I admire that about you." As the conversation flowed, Daniel felt a connection blossoming between them, yet he could sense Olivia's reluctance to fully let him in. He understood that healing took time, and he was more than willing to wait. But as he watched her, a flicker of determination ignited within him. He wanted to be the one who helped her see her worth. Later that week, Olivia confided in her best friend, Mia, about her growing feelings for Daniel. They sat in Mia's cozy living room, surrounded by the comforting scent of freshly baked cookies. "Mia, I don't know what to do," Olivia confessed, her brow furrowed with concern. "He's so kind, and I feel drawn to him. But I can't shake this fear of getting hurt again." Mia leaned forward, her expression earnest. "Olivia, you deserve to be happy. I see the way he looks at you. It's like you're the only person in the room. You should give it a chance. But what if it doesn't work out?" Olivia worried, biting her fingernail. "What if I end up heartbroken all over again?" "That's always a risk when you open your heart," Mia replied gently. "But do you really want to live in fear? You might miss out on something wonderful." Olivia sighed, feeling the weight of Mia's words. "I know you're right, but it's just so hard to let my guard down." "Take it slow then. You don't have to rush into anything. Just see where it goes," Mia encouraged. "You might surprise yourself." As the days passed, Daniel continued to frequent the cafe, each visit deepening their connection. He was patient and respectful, always drawing her out with his genuine interest in her life. But Olivia remained cautious, her heart still shackled by the past. One evening, Daniel decided to surprise her. He had been thinking about how to show her that he cared, and he knew just the thing to brighten her day. He stopped by a local florist and picked out a vibrant bouquet of wildflowers, their colors mirroring the joy he felt at the thought of Olivia. When he arrived at the cafe, the sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow through the windows. Olivia was at the counter, ringing up a customer when Daniel approached. The moment she saw him, her eyes lit up, but then widened in surprise as he presented her with the flowers. "For you," he said, a broad smile on his face. "Just to brighten your day." "Oh, Daniel," Olivia gasped, her hands instinctively reaching for the bouquet. "These are beautiful." "Not as beautiful as you," he replied, his tone playful yet sincere. She blushed, a smile breaking across her face as she inhaled the fragrant flowers. You really didn't have to do this. I wanted to, he insisted, his gaze unwavering. You deserve to be reminded that you're special. In that moment, something shifted between them. The air was thick with unspoken feelings, and Olivia felt her heart swell as the warmth of his words enveloped her. She was still scared, but the tenderness in Daniel's eyes made her want to take a leap of faith. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. This means so much to me. Daniel stepped closer, his voice softening. I care about you, Olivia. I know you've been hurt, but I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Olivia's heart raced at his words, a mix of hope and fear flooding her senses. Could she truly allow herself to feel this way again? As they looked into each other's eyes, she realized that perhaps, just perhaps, it was time to let go of the past and embrace the possibility of something beautiful. Maybe I can try, she said, her voice trembling with uncertainty but laced with courage. Maybe I can let you in. Daniel's smile widened, and in that moment, they both understood that their journey was just beginning, filled with promise and the potential for love. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over their newfound connection, Olivia felt a flicker of hope ignite within her, one that she hadn't felt in a long time. Olivia stood behind the counter of the cafe, her heart racing as she spotted the familiar figure of her ex-husband, Mark, striding through the entrance. A wave of anxiety washed over her, leaving her momentarily frozen in place. The cheerful chatter of patrons around her dulled into a low hum, and all she could focus on was the man who once promised her the world, only to abandon her when she needed him the most. Olivia, Mark called out, a hint of authority in his voice as he approached her. He wore a crisp blue shirt, an air of confidence about him that made her stomach churn. We need to talk. She forced a smile, though it felt more like a grimace. What are you doing here, Mark? She tried to keep her voice steady, but the tremor betrayed her. I want to see Sophie, he stated bluntly, his eyes narrowing. I have rights, you know that. Olivia's heart ached at the mention of their daughter's name. Sophie was her world, and the thought of Mark trying to worm his way back into her life was unbearable. You haven't been in her life for over a year, Mark? Why now? She crossed her arms defensively, willing herself to stand tall. I've had time to think, he replied, his tone softening but not sincere enough to convince her. I want to be a father to her. I want to make things right. Make things right? She echoed incredulously, stepping closer to him, her voice barely above a whisper. You left us. You chose your career over your family. What makes you think you can just waltz back in and demand to see her? Mark shifted uncomfortably, glancing over his shoulder as if gauging the reactions of the patrons around them. I'm not here to fight, Olivia. I just want to talk to her. She deserves to know her father. The cafe felt suffocating, and Olivia's anxiety surged. She glanced toward the window, scanning the street for Daniel. He had been her beacon of light lately, and she longed for his presence to ground her in this moment of chaos. Sophie is happy without you, she said, her voice firm despite the quiver in her heart. I won't let you disrupt her life again. Mark's expression darkened, and for a moment, the charming facade slipped, revealing the anger beneath. You think you can keep her from me? I'm not going to let you do that. Daniel, Olivia shouted suddenly, desperate for his support. She could feel the tension growing, not just within herself but in the air around them. Daniel, can you come here, please? From across the room, Daniel caught her eye, his brow furrowing with concern as he hurried over. He had been seated at a table, sipping his usual Americano, but the urgency in her voice pulled him to her side in an instant. Is everything okay? He asked, his gaze shifting from Olivia to Mark, who stood with a defiant posture. Not exactly, Olivia replied, her voice steadier with Daniel beside her. This is Mark, my ex-husband. He wants to see Sophie. Daniel's expression hardened as he assessed the situation. And what do you want, Mark? He inquired, his voice low and authoritative. I just want to see my daughter, Mark replied, attempting to regain control of the conversation. I have a right to be in her life, right? Daniel echoed incredulously. You've had a year to be a father. What makes you think you can just show up now and demand access? Mark glanced at Daniel, sizing him up as if gauging whether he posed a threat. Who are you to tell me what I can or can't do? I'm someone who cares about Olivia and Sophie, Daniel replied firmly, his protective instinct surfacing. If you think for a second that you can come in here and intimidate them, you're sorely mistaken. Olivia felt a rush of gratitude for Daniel's presence. His unwavering support gave her the strength she needed to stand firm. I won't let you hurt Sophie again, she said, her voice steady. Not now, not ever. Mark's expression shifted from anger to frustration, and he ran a hand through his hair. You'll regret this, Olivia. I'll get my lawyer involved. You can't keep me from my daughter. I can and I will, she replied, her heart pounding. I've worked too hard to build a life for Sophie and me. You're not welcome here. With that, Mark turned on his heel, frustration radiating from him as he stormed out of the cafe, leaving behind a tense silence. Olivia felt as if she had just emerged from a storm, her heart racing with adrenaline. She turned to Daniel, who remained at her side, his expression softening as he took in the turmoil etched on her face. Are you okay? He asked gently, concern lacing his voice. Olivia nodded, though her heart was still racing. I will be. Thank you for being here. I don't know what I would have done without you. You don't have to thank me, he replied, his tone sincere. I'm here for you, Olivia. Always. As the tension gradually dissipated, Olivia took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. I thought I had left that part of my life behind, she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. But he just waltzes in like he owns the place. Daniel reached out, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You're stronger than you realize. You stood up to him. That's what matters. She smiled weakly, grateful for his support. I just want to protect Sophie. She deserves a stable life, and I won't let him ruin that. I understand, Daniel said, his voice low and reassuring. If you need anything, if you ever feel threatened, don't hesitate to reach out to me. You're not alone in this. The warmth of his words wrapped around her like a comforting blanket, and for the first time that day, she felt a flicker of hope. Thank you, Daniel. It means the world to me. As they spoke, the cafe began to buzz with life again, the sounds of laughter and clinking cups returning to fill the air. But Olivia knew that the confrontation with Mark was far from over. She felt a weight on her shoulders, a reminder that the past wasn't just a memory. It was a living entity that could intrude at any moment. Later that evening, after closing the cafe, Olivia sat on her couch, Sophie curled up beside her, engrossed in a colorful picture book. The soft glow of the lamp illuminated the room, creating a cozy atmosphere, but Olivia's mind was elsewhere. She couldn't shake the anxiety that lingered after her confrontation with Mark. Suddenly, her phone buzzed on the table, breaking her reverie. It was a text from Daniel. Hey, just checking in. How are you holding up? She smiled at the message, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She quickly typed a response. I'm okay, just trying to process everything. Thanks for asking. A few moments later, her phone chimed again. You're doing great. Remember, I'm here if you need to talk or if you want to get out of the house for a bit. Olivia bit her lip, considering his offer. She wanted to take him up on it, but felt a pang of guilt. She didn't want to burden him with her troubles. Yet, the thought of stepping out, even for a moment, was tempting. Would you want to grab dinner tomorrow? She typed hesitantly. I'd love that. Just say the time and place. A smile broke across her face as she felt a flicker of excitement. For the first time in a long while, she felt the possibility of something new, something hopeful on the horizon. The grand hall of the charity event was abuzz with laughter and chatter, adorned in elegant decorations that sparkled under the soft glow of chandeliers. Daniel Carter stood at the entrance, his heart racing slightly as he scanned the crowd. He was dressed impeccably in a tailored navy suit, his dark hair neatly combed back, exuding confidence and charm. Yet his eyes searched for a specific person, Olivia Stone. As he spotted her across the room, a radiant smile broke across his face. Olivia looked stunning in a deep emerald dress that accentuated her figure and complemented her auburn hair. She was holding Sophie's hand, who wore a cute little dress that matched her mother's, her wide eyes taking in the lavish surroundings. Daniel felt an overwhelming surge of warmth as he approached them. "Olivia." "Sophie," he called out, his voice cutting through the noise. Olivia turned at the sound, a mixture of surprise and joy lighting up her features. "Daniel, you made it!" she exclaimed, her smile brightening the room even further. "Of course. I wouldn't miss it," he replied, bending slightly to greet Sophie. "And who is this lovely princess?" Sophie giggled, her cheeks flushing. "I'm a fairy, with sparkly wings," she announced proudly, extending her arms to show off her imaginary wings. "Wow, a fairy. I'm honored to meet you," Daniel said, his eyes twinkling with delight. He then turned to Olivia, his expression softening. "You look incredible." "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied with a teasing smile, her heart fluttering slightly at his compliment. The trio mingled for a while, enjoying the atmosphere and the delightful hors d'oeuvres being served. Daniel took Olivia's hand in his, leading her to a quieter corner where they could talk more freely away from the crowd. The music played softly in the background, creating an almost magical ambience around them. "I'm really glad you came tonight," he said, looking deep into her eyes. "You and Sophie bring so much joy to this event." "I was nervous about coming," Olivia admitted, her gaze flickering towards Sophie, who was eagerly watching a group of children dancing. "But I wanted to support you and show Sophie a good time. She loves all the lights and music." "Good choice," Daniel replied, a smile stretching across his lips. "You both deserve to enjoy yourselves. And I'm here for whatever you need tonight." Olivia felt a surge of gratitude toward him. It was more than just his words. It was the way he stood beside her, unwavering and supportive. Just then, Sophie tugged on Olivia's skirt, her wide eyes filled with excitement. "Mommy, can we dance?" she asked, bouncing on her toes. "Of course, sweetheart." "Daniel, would you like to join us?" Olivia asked, her heart swelling with hope that he would embrace this moment with them. "I'd love to," he said, a gleam of enthusiasm in his eyes. Together, they made their way to the makeshift dance floor, where Sophie twirled around, her laughter filling the air. Olivia and Daniel watched her, their hearts lightened by the innocence and joy radiating from the little girl. As they danced, Daniel couldn't help but admire Olivia. She moved gracefully, her laughter mingling with Sophie's as they spun together. In that moment, the rest of the world faded away, and it felt as if they were the only three people in the room. However, the serenity was abruptly shattered when the doors swung open and a figure stormed in. Olivia's heart sank as she recognized her ex-husband, Mark, striding through the crowd with a menacing glare. He was dressed in a wrinkled button-down shirt and jeans that looked out of place in the elegant setting. The atmosphere shifted, tension creeping in as guests turned to stare. "Olivia," Mark shouted, his voice cutting through the music. "We need to talk. Now." Daniel instinctively moved closer to Olivia, his presence a protective barrier. "Stay behind me," he whispered, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. "Mark, not here," Olivia replied, her voice trembling. She could feel her heart racing, anxiety bubbling to the surface. "This isn't the time or place." "Oh, so now you want to hide from me?" he sneered, taking a step closer, his bravado unyielding. "You think you can just keep Sophie away from me? I have rights, you know." Sophie, sensing the tension, clutched Olivia's hand tightly, her innocent eyes darting between her mother and father. "Mommy, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice quivering. "Nothing, sweetie. Just stay close to me," Olivia soothed, trying to maintain her composure. But deep down, she felt the familiar pang of fear. "That's right," Mark continued, his voice rising. "You don't get to dictate when I see my daughter. I want to see her now." Daniel stepped forward, his jaw clenched. "You need to leave. This is not how you handle things," he said firmly, his protective instincts kicking in. "Who the hell are you?" Mark spat, glaring at Daniel. "You think you can play the hero? She's my wife, ex-wife, but still, you don't get to interfere." "Actually, she's not your wife anymore," Daniel shot back, his tone unwavering. and you need to respect her and her decisions regarding Sophie. Olivia felt a rush of emotions, relief mixed with fear. Daniel's presence fortified her courage. Mark, this isn't the place to resolve our issues. I won't let you disrupt this event, she stated, her voice steadier now. I'm not keeping Sophie from you, but you need to approach this like a father, not a bully. The tension in the air was palpable as Mark's face flushed with anger. You think you can just move on? I'm not going anywhere, Olivia. You'll regret this, he spat, before turning on his heel and storming out, leaving a trail of whispers and concerned glances in his wake. As the crowd began to murmur, Daniel turned to Olivia, concern etched on his face. Are you okay? Olivia took a deep breath, trying to quell the storm of emotions swirling inside her. I think so, she replied, her voice shaky but resolute. Thank you for standing up for me. I didn't expect you to do that. Of course I would, he said softly, reaching for her hand. You don't have to face this alone. I'm here for you. Sophie looked up at her mother, her innocent eyes wide with concern. Mommy, can we go home? She asked, her small voice barely above a whisper. Olivia knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair behind Sophie's ear. I think we should, sweetheart. But let's make sure we say goodbye to Daniel first, okay? Sophie nodded, her face scrunching up in confusion. But I want to dance more. I know, love. We'll dance another time, Olivia promised, her heart aching for her daughter's disappointment. Daniel knelt beside them, a warm smile on his face. Let's have that dance another time, Sophie. I promise. We'll have a special evening just for the three of us. Really? Sophie's eyes sparkled with hope, her earlier fears dissipating. Absolutely, Daniel replied, his heart swelling at the thought of spending more moments with them. As they made their way toward the exit, Daniel and Olivia walked hand in hand, a silent understanding passing between them. Olivia felt a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. Although her ex-husband had crashed their night, Daniel's support had fortified her in ways she hadn't anticipated. Once outside, the cool night air enveloped them, but Olivia still felt a lingering warmth from their shared moments. I'm sorry about tonight, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want you to see that side of my life. Olivia, you don't need to apologize, Daniel replied, his grip tightening around her hand. What matters is how you handle it. You showed incredible strength. Strength? Olivia shook her head, her eyes glistening with a mixture of emotions. I felt so weak back there. You were anything but weak, he insisted, his gaze steady and reassuring. You stood up for yourself and for Sophie. That takes courage. As they reached her car, Olivia turned to face him, the moonlight illuminating the features of his face. Thank you for being there, Daniel. It means more than you know. Anytime, Olivia, he said, his voice low and sincere. You and Sophie are worth it. I want to help you, both of you. In that moment, standing in the quiet of the night, Olivia realized the depth of her feelings for Daniel. He had entered her life unexpectedly, bringing light where there had once been darkness. But the shadows of her past still loomed large, and she couldn't ignore the weight they carried. I don't want to drag you into my problems, she admitted quietly. Daniel stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. You're not dragging me into anything. I want to be here for you. I care about you, Olivia. His words lingered in the air, powerful and affirming. Just as she was about to respond, Sophie piped up, breaking the tension. Can we go home now? I'm tired. Olivia chuckled softly, grateful for the interruption. Of course, sweetheart. The evening air was still heavy with the remnants of the charity event, a mixture of laughter, clinking glasses, and the underlying tension that had erupted when Olivia's ex-husband crashed the party. As she lay in bed, the moonlight filtering through the curtains, Olivia found herself staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She thought about the way Daniel had stepped in to defend her, how he had taken her hand and led her away from the chaos. There was something undeniably reassuring about his presence, yet her heart was a battlefield of conflicting emotions. What if he comes back? She whispered into the darkness, her voice barely audible. The thought gripped her with fear. It had been a long time since she felt safe enough to let someone in, and now, The shadows of her past threatened to eclipse her budding relationship with Daniel. Could she truly trust him? After all, her ex-husband had once been someone she had loved deeply. That love had turned to betrayal, and the scars were still fresh. Just as she began to drift into a restless sleep, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She reached for it, half expecting it to be a message from Daniel, but her heart sank when she saw the name flashing on the screen. Mark, her ex-husband. With trembling hands, she answered the call. "What do you want?" she said, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. "Olivia, we need to talk," Mark said, his tone laced with the same arrogance that had driven her away from him in the first place. "I want to see Sophie. I have rights, you know." Her heart raced, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "You lost the right to dictate anything in our lives the day you walked out on us. Don't act like you're the victim here," he retorted. "I want joint custody. I'm not going to let you keep her from me." The conversation spiraled into a dizzying mix of threats and accusations, each word from Mark striking her like a physical blow. Once the call ended, Olivia was left breathless, her heart pounding violently in her chest. She felt the walls closing in around her, the anxiety creeping back like a dark fog. The next morning was bright and sunny, but Olivia couldn't shake the shadows from the night before. She made the usual breakfast for Sophie, who was blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in her mother's heart. "Mommy, can we go to the park today?" Sophie asked, her eyes sparkling with innocence. "Sure, sweetheart," Olivia replied, forcing a smile. "But first, let's get ready for the day." As they made their way to the cafe, Olivia couldn't help but feel a mix of dread and anticipation. Daniel had texted her that morning, suggesting they meet for lunch. The thought of seeing him sent her heart racing, but the looming threat of Mark weighed heavily on her mind. When she arrived at the cafe, Daniel was already there, seated at their usual table. His presence was magnetic, and for a moment, Olivia felt a flicker of hope. He stood up as she approached, his eyes lighting up with warmth. "Hey there," he said, his voice smooth and inviting. "How are you?" "Hi," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm okay, I guess." He studied her for a moment, his brow furrowing slightly. "You don't look okay. Is something bothering you?" Olivia hesitated, the truth swirling in her mind. She wanted to confide in him, to let him know about the call from Mark, but the fear of burdening him kept her silent. "It's just the aftermath of the event. You know how it goes." Daniel reached across the table, his fingers brushing against hers. "If there's anything you need to talk about, I'm here. You don't have to go through this alone." His sincerity tugged at her heart. "I appreciate that, Daniel. Really, I do." She took a deep breath, weighing her options. I'm worried about Sophie. Mark wants to see her again." Daniel's expression shifted, concern etching lines on his face. "What do you mean he wants to see her again?" "He wants joint custody," Olivia admitted, feeling the weight of her words. "He thinks he has rights, and I don't know how to stop him." Daniel leaned back, his jaw tightening. "That's not right. You're doing a great job as a mother. You shouldn't have to worry about him taking her away from you." "I know, but it's complicated," she said, feeling her heart race at the thought of Mark's threats. "He can be persuasive, and he knows how to manipulate the system." "Then we need to do something about it," Daniel said, his voice resolute. "You shouldn't have to face this alone. How about we take a weekend trip? Just the three of us, you, me, and Sophie. It could be a great way to escape for a bit and strengthen our bond." Olivia's heart leaped at the idea. It sounded like a perfect escape, yet a part of her hesitated. "I don't know, Daniel. What if he tries to find us?" "I promise you, he won't," Daniel reassured her, his eyes locking onto hers with a fierce determination. "You need a break, and so does Sophie. I'll take care of everything. Just say yes." After a moment of contemplation, Olivia felt the tension in her chest begin to ease. Maybe a weekend away was exactly what they needed, a chance to breathe and reconnect. "Okay, let's do it." "Great." Daniel grinned, his enthusiasm infectious. "I'll handle the arrangements. We can go to that cabin by the lake I mentioned the other day. It'll be perfect." As they finished their lunch, Olivia felt a sense of relief wash over her. Perhaps this trip would allow her to breathe again, to let down her walls just a little. But deep down, the shadow of Mark still loomed, and she couldn't ignore the impending storm. The weekend arrived, and as they drove toward the cabin, Olivia felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Sophie was in the back seat, chattering away about all the fun they would have, while Daniel drove with a calm confidence that made her heart flutter. Once they reached the cabin, nestled amongst towering pines and overlooking a serene lake, Olivia couldn't help but marvel at its beauty. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of pine and wildflowers. "Wow, this place is amazing," Sophie exclaimed, jumping out of the car and running toward the water's edge. "It really is," Daniel agreed, watching Sophie with a smile. He turned to Olivia, his expression softening. "What do you think?" "It's perfect," Olivia replied, feeling the weight of the world begin to lift. As they settled in, the days unfolded in a blissful haze. They spent lazy mornings sipping coffee on the porch, afternoons filled with laughter, and evenings gathered around a crackling fire, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories. For the first time in a long time, Olivia felt a sense of peace. But just as she began to let her guard down, her phone rang, shattering the tranquility. The caller ID made her stomach drop. "Mark?" She stared at the screen, frozen, the laughter from earlier fading as dread washed over her. "Are you going to answer it?" Daniel asked, noticing her silence. I can't," Olivia stammered, her heart racing. "It's Mark." "Take a deep breath," he urged, his voice steady. "You can do this." With shaking hands, Olivia answered. "What do you want?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Olivia, you can't run away from this," Mark said, his tone dripping with condescension. "I know where you are. I'm coming for Sophie." The world around her seemed to blur as his words sank in. Panic surged through her, a visceral response to the threat. "You can't do this. She's happy here. Don't think I won't fight for her," he replied, his voice cold and calculated. "I'll do whatever it takes." As the call ended, Olivia felt the walls closing in around her once more. The peace they had found shattered, leaving her breathless and shaken. Daniel, sensing her distress, moved closer, concern etched across his face. "Olivia? What happened?" Tears brimmed in her eyes as she struggled to regain her composure. "He knows where we are," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He's coming for us." The serene weekend they had envisioned seemed to slip through her fingers like sand. The storm was back, and this time, it felt more threatening than ever. As Olivia stood in the kitchen, her hands trembling slightly, she stared at the phone in disbelief. The voice on the other end belonged to her ex-husband, a man whose presence she had tried so hard to escape. He was demanding to see Sophie, threatening legal action if she refused. The weight of his words pressed down on her chest, and she felt as if she were suffocating. Just moments ago, she had been enjoying a rare moment of peace with Daniel, who was in the next room preparing dinner, completely unaware of the storm brewing in her heart. "Olivia, are you there?" Her ex-husband's voice broke through her thoughts, sharp and insistent. "You can't keep Sophie from me. I have rights, and I'm prepared to take this to court if I have to." "Stop it, Mark," she snapped, her voice trembling with emotion. "You know you abandoned us. You can't just waltz back into our lives and expect everything to be fine. I won't let you hurt her again. Don't be so naive. I'll get a lawyer, and you'll regret this." With that, he hung up, leaving Olivia reeling. The echoes of his threats filled her mind, and for a moment, she felt completely lost. She leaned against the counter, taking deep breaths, trying to steady herself, but the fear of losing Sophie threatened to consume her. "Olivia?" Daniel's voice floated in from the dining room, laced with concern. "Is everything okay?" She wiped her eyes quickly and took a moment to compose herself before stepping into the dining area. The aroma of garlic and herbs filled the space, but the warmth of the scene was lost on her. Daniel stood at the stove, stirring a pot, his back turned to her. He looked so peaceful, so focused, and she hated to disrupt that tranquility. "Olivia?" He turned around, and the moment he saw her face, his expression shifted to worry. "What's wrong?" Her heart raced as she took a step closer, her voice barely above a whisper. It was Mark. He wants to see Sophie. He's threatening to take me to court for joint custody. Daniel's brow furrowed. What? That's insane. He hasn't been in her life for so long. You have every right to keep him away. I know, she replied, her voice cracking. But he's serious. He said he'd hire a lawyer, and I can't go through another battle. I can't lose her, Daniel. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them, and she felt the warmth of his presence envelop her. Olivia, listen to me. You are a great mother, and you've done everything right for Sophie. This isn't about what he wants. It's about what's best for her. Maybe I'm not strong enough to fight this, she admitted, tears spilling down her cheeks. Every time I think I'm moving on, he drags me back into his chaos. I just want to protect her. Daniel reached out, cupping her face in his hands. You are strong, Olivia. You've faced so much already, and this is just another hurdle. I want to help you. Let me help you. His sincerity washed over her like a balm, soothing her frayed nerves. How can you help? I can't ask you to get involved in this mess. Why not? You don't have to do this alone, he insisted, his gaze unwavering. I can hire a lawyer for you, someone who knows family law inside and out. We can take this fight to him together. You do that for me? She asked, a mix of disbelief and hope lighting her eyes. Absolutely, he replied, his voice steady. And there's something else. I need to tell you something. He took a deep breath, his eyes searching hers for understanding. I've grown to care for you deeply. I love you, Olivia. I want to be there for you. Not just today, but for every challenge that comes our way. His confession hung in the air, and for a moment, the world outside their small kitchen faded away. Olivia's heart raced. It was the last thing she had expected to hear. She opened her mouth to respond, but words escaped her. Instead, she stepped closer, resting her head against his chest. The warmth of his embrace enveloped her, filling her with a sense of safety she hadn't felt in years. I've been so afraid, she murmured, her voice muffled against him. Afraid of getting hurt again, afraid of letting anyone in. But you make me feel safe, Daniel. I promise you, I want to help, he said softly, his fingers gently brushing through her hair. Let's take this step together. We can fight this together. With a deep breath, Olivia pulled back slightly to look into his eyes. I don't want to put you through this. You deserve better than my chaos. Olivia, you're not chaos to me. You're the woman I care about, and I want to be part of your life. You and Sophie are worth fighting for, he replied, determination etched across his features. Tears welled in her eyes again, but this time they were tears of gratitude. Thank you, Daniel. I don't know what I would do without you. As they stood together, the weight of her fears began to lift, replaced by a newfound sense of hope. She realized that maybe she could lean on him, that it was okay to let someone in. What do we do next? She asked, feeling a spark of determination ignite within her. First, let me reach out to someone I know in family law. My father specialized in this area for years, he revealed, his voice steady and confident. He's retired now, but he still has connections. I'm sure he can guide us through this. Your father was a lawyer, she asked, surprised. Why didn't you tell me before? I didn't want to overwhelm you with my past, he admitted, a hint of vulnerability in his tone. But this is different. I'll make sure you're protected, and we'll get through this together. Olivia felt a wave of relief wash over her. Daniel's commitment to her and Sophie made her heart swell with gratitude. I can't thank you enough, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. But I need to be sure about this. I don't want to drag you into a fight that could get messy. Daniel held her gaze. You've already dragged me in, Olivia. I'm in this with you, whether you like it or not. You're not alone anymore. With a renewed sense of purpose, they began to formulate a plan, exchanging ideas and strategies. As they spoke, Olivia felt a sense of unity forming between them, a bond that was growing stronger with each shared word. Later that evening, as they sat together at the dining table, Sophie's laughter echoed through the house as she played with her toys nearby. Daniel glanced at Olivia, a smile on his face. You know, no matter what happens, I want to be a part of both of your lives. I see so much joy in Sophie, and it reminds me of how wonderful life can be." Olivia nodded, her heart swelling with emotion. "You've already brought so much light into our lives, Daniel. Just having you here feels like a miracle." They shared a moment of understanding, a silent promise passing between them. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, united as a family.